My father left my sister a $950, the $1,000 house, and me a crumbling old shack, but the moment I stepped inside, everything changed forever. My name is Linda Hayes, and at 66 years old, I had spent 3 long years caring for my ailing father. Every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night on an uncomfortable chair by his bedside, every mile driven to make sure he was safe, those sacrifices were mine alone. I never expected riches or recognition, but I believed that my dedication would at least earn a little respect. I was wrong. 3 days after his passing, sitting in the cold, sterile office of our family lawyer, the will was read aloud. My sister Carol, barely masking her smirk, squeezed her designer handbag and called me in the kind of sarcastic tone only she could manage the worst daughter. My heart sank. I wanted to shout about every moment I had spent tending to our father while she showed up only a handful of times, always with excuses about work or being too busy. But I stayed silent. Some battles aren't worth the dirt they drag you through, and I had learned that lesson long ago. Driving to the lake house, I braced myself for the disaster I knew awaited. The winding back roads brought back faint memories of my childhood summers, but now they were overgrown with weeds, mirroring the bitterness I felt. The roof sagged like it had given up on life paint, peeled from the shutters, and the porch seemed ready to collapse under its own weight. Every step closer made my chest tighten. Anger, exhaustion, and despair mingled inside me. I was prepared to find a ruin, the final insult from a man I had loved and cared for, and from a sister I never fully understood. I turned the key, expecting dust and decay. Instead, I stepped into a home that smelled faintly of lemon and vanilla, a home where the hardwood floors gleamed, furniture was carefully dusted and protected, and a pot of coffee sat warm on the stove, as if waiting for me. My mouth went dry. I had imagined abandonment, but this was cared for, loved even. Then I saw her Eleanor, a woman I had never met in person, yet instantly recognized from a photograph my father had left behind. She was poised and calm, moving around the kitchen with a quiet confidence that made it clear she belonged here. The presence of someone else in this house, someone who had shared so many moments with my father, sent a ripple of shock through me. The story I thought I knew about my family was about to unravel, and I had no idea just how deep the secrets ran. Eleanor looked at me calmly, almost as if she had been expecting my shock. Then she spoke, her voice steady but gentle. My father had shared a private, intimate relationship with her for 7 years. 7 years. Right in the middle of my mother's long, painful battle with illness. My chest tightened, a mixture of betrayal, anger, and confusion swirling inside me. I wanted to scream, to accuse, to demand answers, but instead I listened. Eleanor wasn't there to defend him or soothe my outrage. She was simply telling the truth without embellishment or apology. As I absorbed her words, another revelation hit me. The lake house wasn't entirely mine. Eleanor explained that my father had carefully structured a living trust. I was the legal owner of the land itself, but the house, the structure, the furniture, the carefully maintained interior belonged to Eleanor. It was not a disaster. It was a deliberate plan, a strategy designed to protect the property, to prevent me from selling too hastily, and to ensure that the opportunity hidden within this land could one day be mine to embrace fully. My father had always been cautious, always thinking ahead, and now I saw it in a new light. The layers of family deception didn't stop there. Eleanor gently revealed what I had suspected, but had not dared to confirm. Carol, using her position as my father's financial power of attorney, had quietly purchased the house officially in a manner that was far from ethical. Bank records correspondence, even emails. Eleanor had documentation showing how she manipulated him, all under the guise of helping. Everything I had endured, all the sacrifices I had made, had been contrasted with my sister's calculated absence and opportunistic maneuvering. At that moment, the full picture became clear. My patience, my quiet endurance, My careful attention to my father's needs, years of selfless care, had not gone unnoticed. But Carol's greed, her disregard for morality, had placed her in a precarious position that could no longer hide in the shadows. The realization made my hands tremble slightly, a mix of fury and anticipation. There was justice to be claimed, but first I had to process the layers of betrayal, loyalty, and secrecy that had shaped my family's history. Sitting there in the warmth of a kitchen that should have been empty but was instead alive with the presence of Eleanor, I felt a strange combination of dread and hope. Dread for the truths I had just uncovered, for the complexity of navigating this web of family deceit, but hope too. Hope that the years of care I had given, the quiet sacrifices, would not be erased or forgotten. Somehow, amidst the shock and the betrayal, I began to understand the careful orchestration of my father's plans. He had left a puzzle for me to solve, one that required patience, clarity, and courage. By the time our conversation ended, I knew this was no ordinary inheritance. It wasn't simply land or a house. It was a test, a revelation, and a promise all at once. And as I stepped back into the sunlight outside, my mind buzzed with questions, strategies, and the anticipation of uncovering what lay hidden beneath the surface of the lake house. The story I had thought I knew was only just beginning, and the true challenge was yet to come. After our conversation, Eleanor handed me a carefully folded letter from my father, the kind of letter that felt heavy with purpose. It contained precise instructions. Beneath a loose floorboard in the bedroom closet lay something important, something he wanted me to find. My hands trembled as I lifted the board, revealing a small, weathered metal box sealed with tape, yellowed by time. Inside were journals, documents, photographs, and something that made my heart skip a beat: Native American artifacts meticulously cataloged and preserved. Pottery, shard stone tools, jewelry, proof of a settlement that had existed centuries before anyone could have imagined. I sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through the journals. My father had documented everything: dates, locations, the condition of every item, photographs, showing the site as it was being built. He had spent decades researching and protecting this land, never exploiting it, always ensuring that the history remained intact. And now all of it was mine to uncover, mine to preserve. The sheer weight of it was overwhelming. This crumbling old lake house was no longer just a house, it was a doorway into history. Eleanor arranged a meeting with Dr. Sarah Bennett, a state archaeological commission specialist. Together we walked the property, her excitement palpable as she examined the site. Using ground-penetrating radar and careful surveying, she confirmed my father's findings. This was not a simple homestead. It was a substantial pre-Columbian settlement, possibly 800 years old. The implications hit me like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just historically significant, it had real monetary value. Museums, grants, preservation fees, and finders' compensation could make the lake house land worth millions. I felt a rush of vindication and incredulity. The very property Carol had mocked, calling it a shack, was now a treasure trove of history and fortune. I smiled as her text came through, dripping with sarcasm. "Hope you enjoy your little shack, sis." I couldn't help but laugh. Little shack indeed. She had no idea that her mockery was misplaced, that she had underestimated both the land and the person standing in it. The thrill wasn't just financial. There was something profoundly satisfying in knowing that all the years of care, loyalty, and patience I had poured into my family and into my father's life had positioned me to receive this gift. It wasn't handed over lightly, it was earned through perseverance, through enduring hardship, and through choosing integrity over resentment. As Dr. Bennett meticulously documented the site, explaining the historical significance and the potential compensation, I felt a mix of awe and excitement. I realized that my father had thought of everything, planning for a future I wasn't even aware I could have. The lake house, once a symbol of loss and injustice, had transformed into a beacon of possibility, legacy, and empowerment. I couldn't wait to see Carol's face when she discovered that the worthless shack she had scorned was now a property of immense historical and financial importance. But even more than that, I felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. For once, the truth, patience, and loyalty were rewarded, and the years of sacrifice had led me to something extraordinary, an inheritance far beyond bricks and mortar. Carol arrived unannounced the following morning. Her perfectly styled hair slightly tousled her eyes, sharp with determination. She had clearly heard about the archaeological survey and expected to stake a claim to insert herself into the story as if she had any right. I watched her from the kitchen, calm, and measured Eleanor by my side. I knew the truth. With my father's letter and Eleanor's documentation, I had all the evidence I needed. Carol had manipulated my father's finances, quietly redirecting his resources under the guise of assistance. She had taken advantage of trust, and now when faced with the reality of the lake house's true value, she had no legal ground to stand on. I met her gaze holding my father's letter in one hand. "Carol," I said evenly, "you already received the house 3 years ago using your power of attorney. You benefited financially from Dad, but now it's time to make things right." She frowned, confusion and frustration flickering across her face. I continued, "I'm asking you to transfer half the value of the Maple Drive house, $475,000, as compensation for the years I cared for Dad while you focused on your real estate business." For a moment, she said nothing. I could see her calculating, weighing the costs of resistance against compliance. Finally, with a reluctant sigh, she agreed. We had the agreement drafted Eleanor's paralegal experience, ensuring every clause protected my rights. Carol signed the document with sharp, angry strokes, her pride bruised but powerless against the truth. Watching her leave, I felt a quiet sense of triumph. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. Years of silent care, patience, and integrity had finally been acknowledged. The person who had exploited trust had to answer for her actions, while the one who had sacrificed, endured, and stayed loyal was recognized. As the archaeological team began their work, the lake house transformed into a hub of activity and media attention. Dr. Sarah Bennett and her team meticulously unearthed artifacts, each discovery more astonishing than the last. Reporters, cameras, and historians documented the site, highlighting its historical significance. And Carol, she hovered on the sidelines, stunned, her carefully constructed image of control crumbling as the true value of the property became undeniable. I realized in that moment that patience and honesty were far more powerful than cunning and greed. My father had trusted me with not just the land, but with the legacy of his life's work, and I had honored that trust. I understood something deeper true. Justice is not always immediate, and it rarely looks like a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it unfolds quietly, revealing itself in the careful alignment of truth, persistence, and moral courage. By the end of the day, the lake house had shifted from a symbol of betrayal and disappointment to one of empowerment and recognition. I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction, not just from financial recompense, but from seeing integrity and loyalty rewarded and witnessing the consequences of greed. In this story, patience, insight, and steadfast dedication had ultimately prevailed, leaving a lasting lesson about family justice and the strength of character. Looking back on everything that happened, I've realized that life has a way of teaching lessons in the most unexpected ways. One of the most important is the value of quiet sacrifice. For years, I devoted myself to caring for my father, not for recognition or reward, but out of love and duty. I never imagined that my efforts would be noticed in such a dramatic way, yet here I am standing on land that holds not only historical treasures, but also the tangible acknowledgement of those years of dedication. Sometimes the smallest unnoticed actions lay the foundation for the greatest rewards. Another lesson is the importance of intuition and patience. Throughout the entire ordeal, I had to trust my instincts even when everything seemed unfair or confusing. Listening to my own feelings allowed me to see people clearly, to recognize duplicity, and to act when the time was right. Life rarely presents itself in neat, predictable ways, but careful observation and self-trust often guide us toward truth, even when it hides behind layers of deception. I've also learned that honesty and fairness endure, while greed eventually exposes itself. My sister's actions were manipulative and short-sighted, and in the end they unraveled in ways she never anticipated. Acting with integrity, though sometimes slower and more challenging, produces lasting results. It's not just about legal documents or financial restitution, it's about character, moral courage, and leaving a legacy that reflects who you truly are. And perhaps most profoundly, life is not solely about possessions or wealth. The lake house, now a site of historical significance, reminded me that contributing to something bigger than oneself, protecting history, supporting knowledge, and preserving culture, is a gift far greater than money. The creation of my archaeological research foundation is a testament to that belief, and it brings me joy, knowing that this work will benefit generations to come. I still own the lake house, and every time I walk its halls, I feel a sense of peace and accomplishment. Carol never reached out again, and I take quiet satisfaction in knowing that greed and short-sightedness often lead to more loss than anyone expects. But more importantly, I have discovered the profound reward of being valued for who I am, not just for what I can do for others. If this story resonates with you, I invite you to like, share, and comment below. Tell us your own experiences, your own lessons learned. Your voice matters, and together we can celebrate the courage, resilience, and strength that define women's lives. And don't forget to follow Real Her Stories for more heartfelt, inspiring tales of bravery, family, and the everyday battles that shape our journey. Life may be unpredictable, but through patience, honesty, and self-respect, we can find justice, meaning, and fulfillment in ways we never imagined.